The lawyer's envelope trembled in my hands as I read the words that would change everything. Petition for custody. Lily Marie Patterson. After 15 years of raising my granddaughter alone, her biological father wanted her back. The same man who'd abandoned her on my doorstep with a note calling her my burden now wanted to claim the brilliant young woman she'd become. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I'm Maggie Patterson, and at 67, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. Boy, was I wrong. But before I tell you about the legal battle that nearly destroyed us both, let me take you back to where this whole mess started. It was March 15th, 2009. The phone call came at 2:47 in the morning. You know, that time when good news never happens. Emma, my beautiful 27-year-old daughter, had been hit by a drunk driver on her way home from her nursing job. She died instantly, they said. No suffering, as if that was supposed to comfort me. Jake, her husband of 3 years, sobbed into the phone. She's gone, Maggie. Our Emma's gone. I held him at the funeral as he clutched 6-month-old Lily, his face hollow with grief. We all leaned on each other those first few weeks, bound together by our shared loss. But grief does strange things to people. Some rise above it, others drown in it. Jake chose to drown, and he decided to take my granddaughter down with him. The drinking started immediately after the funeral. Then came the late nights, the missed feedings, the crying baby left alone while Jake passed out on the couch. I tried helping, bringing meals, babysitting, cleaning their small apartment. But every suggestion I made was met with hostility. Stop trying to replace Emma, he'd snap. Lily doesn't need you hovering around. 3 months after Emma's death, I arrived for my weekly visit to find the apartment door wide open. My heart stopped as I rushed inside, calling their names. The place was trashed, empty bottles everywhere, spoiled food, and in the nursery, little Lily screaming in her crib, unchanged and unfed for who knows how long. That's when I found the note on the kitchen counter, written in Jake's messy handwriting. She's your burden now. I can't do this anymore. Just like that, he was gone. No forwarding address, no phone number, nothing. He'd simply vanished, leaving me standing in that disaster of an apartment, holding a 6-month-old baby who would never know her mother. And you know what the really twisted part was? Part of me felt relieved. The social worker who came the next day was a tired-looking woman named Janet Morrison who'd clearly seen too much in her career. She surveyed the abandoned apartment with practiced eyes while I bounced Lily on my hip, trying to keep her calm. How long has the father been gone? Janet asked, making notes on her clipboard. Since yesterday morning, as far as I can tell. But honestly, he'd been checking out mentally for months. I shifted Lily to my other arm. She was such a tiny thing, all dark curls and Emma's blue eyes. Janet nodded grimly. We'll need to file abandonment paperwork, but given that you're the grandmother and there's no other family. She looked up at me. Are you prepared to take full custody? The question everyone had been dancing around for the past 24 hours. Was I ready to raise another child at 52? To go back to sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the constant worry that comes with being responsible for another human being? I looked down at Lily, who had stopped crying and was staring up at me with those impossibly blue eyes. In that moment, she wasn't a burden. She was all I had left of Emma. Yes, I said firmly. I'll take her. The paperwork took 6 weeks to process. 6 weeks of temporary custody that stretched into something permanent when Jake never surfaced to contest it. Not a single phone call, birthday card, or child support payment. It was like he'd been erased from existence. Those early years were harder than I'd expected. I'd forgotten how exhausting babies could be. The 3 a.m. feedings, the teething, the way they could go from angelic to demonic in the span of 5 seconds. My friends were all moving into the grandmother phase, spoiling grandkids for a few hours before sending them home. I was living it 24/7, but Lily was special from the beginning. Even as a toddler, she had this incredible curiosity about everything. While other kids were content with picture books, she was trying to read actual words. By age 4, she was doing simple math in her head. By 7, she was reading at a high school level. Have you considered having her tested? Her second-grade teacher, Mrs. Henderson, suggested during a parent conference. I've been teaching for 28 years, and I've never seen anything quite like Lily's abilities. Testing revealed what I'd suspected. Lily was what they called profoundly gifted, with an IQ that put her in the top 1% of the population. The school counselor recommended accelerated programs, private tutoring, maybe even skipping grades. But I'd learned something about gifted children from my research. They needed stability and emotional support just as much as intellectual stimulation. And after losing her parents so young, stability was exactly what Lily needed most. So we found our rhythm. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a local dental practice, which gave me flexibility for school pickups and helped pay for the tutoring sessions and educational programs that kept Lily challenged. We spent evenings reading together, working on puzzles, and talking about everything from quantum physics to why people behave the way they do. The years flew by. Lily grew from a curious toddler into a brilliant young woman who could discuss literature with adults and solve mathematical equations that made my head spin. But more importantly, she was kind, funny, and despite her incredible intelligence, refreshingly normal in all the ways that mattered, which is why what happened on her 15th birthday caught me completely off guard. "Grandma, I need to tell you something," Lily said, setting down her fork at our birthday dinner. We were at Romano's, her favorite Italian restaurant, celebrating another year together. 15 years old. Where had the time gone? "You know you can tell me anything, sweetheart," I replied, though something in her tone made me nervous. Lily had been secretive for the past few months, spending hours on her laptop working on what she called a project for school. She took a deep breath. "Remember that app idea I mentioned? The one for helping kids with learning disabilities?" I nodded. Lily had been passionate about accessibility technology ever since tutoring a dyslexic classmate who struggled with traditional learning methods. "Well, I didn't just design it, I actually built it. And it's been accepted into the beta program for Apple's educational initiatives." My fork clattered to my plate. "What does that mean exactly?" Lily's eyes were bright with excitement and nervousness. "It means they want to feature it in their app store. And if it does well, they want to discuss a licensing deal." I stared at my granddaughter, this brilliant young woman who continued to amaze me every day. "Lily, that's incredible. But how did you even know how to build an app?" She grinned sheepishly. "YouTube University mostly, plus some online courses. Oh, and I might have been in contact with some developers who helped me with the more complex coding." Wait. I held up my hand, trying to process this. "You've been working with adult developers? Online?" "Lily, we've talked about internet safety." I know. But Grandma, this is legitimate. I have all the documentation, the contracts, everything. Mrs. Chen from the computer science program at the high school helped me review it all. Over the next 2 hours, Lily walked me through everything. The months of planning, the coding tutorials, the beta testing with local schools. And yes, the proper legal channels she'd followed with the school's guidance. My 15-year-old granddaughter had essentially started her own tech company. "The initial licensing offer is for $50,000, she said quietly as we shared dessert. "But if the app takes off the way they think it will, it could be much more." I nearly choked on my tiramisu. $50,000? That's just the beginning, Grandma. The education technology market is huge. And my app actually helps kids learn better. The test results from the pilot program were incredible. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my mind around what had happened. My little girl, because no matter how tall she got or how brilliant she was, she'd always be my little girl, had just landed a deal with one of the biggest tech companies in the world. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Phone calls with lawyers, meetings with Apple representatives, interviews with the local newspaper about the teen tech prodigy from small-town Maine. Lily handled it all with a maturity that amazed me, but I could see the pressure wearing on her. "Are you sure you want all this attention?" I asked one evening, after she'd finished a video interview with a national morning show. "We could always keep things quieter, focus on your education." Lily looked at me with an expression that reminded me so much of Emma, it took my breath away. "Grandma, this could change everything for us. For kids who learn differently, for our future. I want to do this." And that's when I realized my granddaughter wasn't just brilliant, she was brave in a way I'd never been. Where I might have chosen the safe path, she was willing to step into the unknown because she believed in something bigger than herself. The app launched 3 weeks later. Within the first day, it had over 10,000 downloads. By the end of the week, it was featured on the front page of the education section in the App Store. By the end of the month, Lily Patterson had become the youngest person ever to land a 7-figure licensing deal with Apple. My quiet life in our small Maine town was about to become anything but quiet. The first sign of trouble came disguised as success. CNN wanted to do a segment on Lily for their Young Innovators series. The producer, a friendly woman named Sarah Martinez, explained that they wanted to focus on Lily's inspirational story, a brilliant teenager creating technology to help other kids succeed. "We'd love to interview both of you," Sarah explained during our phone conversation. "The grandmother who raised a tech prodigy. It's exactly the kind of heartwarming story people need right now." I should have known better. I should have insisted on seeing the questions beforehand, should have prepared better for what was coming. But honestly, I was so proud of Lily that I wasn't thinking strategically. The interview was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in our living room. Sarah and her crew arrived right on time, setting up lights and cameras that made our modest home look like a television studio. Lily was nervous, but excited, dressed in the new blue sweater we'd bought for the occasion. The questions started innocently enough. Lily's inspiration for the app, her coding process, her hopes for helping other students. She was articulate and passionate, explaining complex technical concepts in ways that anyone could understand. Then Sarah turned to me. "Maggie, tell us about raising Lily on your own. It must have been challenging, especially recognizing and nurturing her exceptional gifts." "It was the greatest privilege of my life," I answered honestly. "Lily has always been special, not just because of her intelligence, but because of her heart. She genuinely wants to make the world better." "And Lily's parents?" Sarah asked casually. "I understand they're not in the picture." The question I'd been dreading. Lily and I had discussed this. We'd agreed to keep the explanation simple and private. "Lily's mother, my daughter Emma, passed away when Lily was just 6 months old," I said carefully. "It's been just the two of us since then." "And her father?" I felt Lily tense beside me on the couch. "He wasn't able to care for her after Emma died. It was better for everyone that I raised Lily." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "So he gave up custody voluntarily?" "The situation was complicated," I said, hoping my tone conveyed that this line of questioning was closed. But Sarah pressed on. "According to our research, there's no record of formal custody proceedings or voluntary relinquishment. In fact, it appears that Lily's father, Jake Patterson, simply disappeared after your daughter's death. Would you say he abandoned his daughter?" The word abandoned hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I could see Lily's face crumple slightly. We'd never used that word before, even though it was exactly what had happened. "I think that's enough about personal matters," I said firmly. "We're here to talk about Lily's achievement." But the damage was done. Sarah wrapped up the interview professionally, but I could see the calculating look in her eyes. This wasn't going to be the heartwarming segment we'd expected. The story aired 2 weeks later. While most of it focused on Lily's brilliance and the success of her app, there was a significant segment about her tragic backstory. The daughter of a nurse who died in a car accident, abandoned by her father and raised by a heroic grandmother who sacrificed everything for her granddaughter's success. It was all true, but the way they presented it made me uncomfortable. Lily's story wasn't tragic. It was triumphant. Yes, she'd faced challenges, but she'd overcome them with grace and determination. More interviews followed. Tech blogs, educational magazines, even a podcast about young entrepreneurs. Each time the story grew a little more dramatic, the details a little more specific. And that's when the lawyers started calling. "Mrs. Patterson, this is David Chen from Miller, Santos and Associates. We represent Jake Patterson regarding his daughter, Lily." My blood ran cold. After 15 years of silence, he was coming back. "Mr. Patterson has been following his daughter's recent success with great interest," the lawyer continued. "He's concerned about her well-being and believes it's time to re-establish his parental relationship." I sank into the nearest chair. After 15 years? Where has he been for the past 15 years? Mr. Patterson went through a difficult period after losing his wife. He's since gotten the help he needed and is now in a position to provide a stable, loving home for Lily. Stable, loving, home. The words felt like mockery coming from this stranger's mouth. "He abandoned her," I said quietly. That's one interpretation. Mr. Patterson prefers to characterize it as recognizing his limitations during a time of crisis and ensuring his daughter was cared for by a capable relative. The spin was masterful, I had to admit. Transform abandonment into self-sacrifice. Make the villain look like a hero. What does he want? I asked, though I already knew. Full custody of his daughter. We'll be filing papers within the week. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen, staring at the wall where I'd hung 15 years' worth of Lily's artwork, school photos, and achievement certificates. Every milestone he'd missed, every moment of joy and struggle we'd shared, every night I'd stayed up with a sick child, or helped with homework, or simply listened to her dreams and fears. Now that she was successful, now that she was profitable, he wanted her back. The bastard was about to discover that I don't give up my family without a fight. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Lily asked the moment she walked through the door from school. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for 3 hours, staring at the legal papers that had been hand-delivered that afternoon. I looked up at my 15-year-old granddaughter, tall like Emma, with Jake's dark hair, but completely her own person, and felt my heart break a little. How do you tell someone that the father who abandoned them now wants them back because they're worth something? "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." Lily dropped her backpack and slid into the chair across from me, her expression shifting from concerned to worried. She'd always been perceptive. She could read my moods better than anyone. "It's about your father," I began carefully. Her face went very still. "My father's been dead to me for 15 years. What about him?" He's seen the news coverage about your app, and he's decided he wants to be part of your life again." Lily snorted, a sound so uncharacteristic for her that it caught me off guard. "Let me guess. Now that I'm potentially worth millions, suddenly he remembers he has a daughter?" Sometimes her maturity amazed me, and sometimes it broke my heart that she'd had to develop it so young. "He's filed for custody, Lily. He claims that he was grieving when he left you with me, and now that he's gotten help, he wants to resume his parental responsibilities." The papers rustled as I slid them across the table. Lily read through them with the same focused attention she brought to everything else, her expression growing darker with each page. "This is garbage," she said finally. "Pure manipulation. Look at this language. Temporary placement during a crisis, ensuring the child's welfare during the defendant's incapacitation. He's trying to rewrite history. You understand what this means? It means we're going to court. And it means I need to decide whether I want anything to do with the man who left me when I was 6 months old." She looked up at me, and I saw Emma in her eyes, that stubborn determination that had gotten my daughter through nursing school and would have carried her through anything life threw at her. "What do you want, Lily? Really?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see her brilliant mind working through all the implications. "I'm curious about him," she admitted finally. "I've always wondered what he was like, why he made the choices he did. But Grandma, you're my family. You're the one who raised me, who taught me everything important, who believed in me even when I was being a difficult teenager. You've never been difficult a day in your life." She smiled at that. "Remember the great homework rebellion of 7th grade? When you refused to do busy work because it was beneath your intellectual level? That wasn't difficult. That was reasonable. See? That's exactly what I mean. You've always understood me, always supported me, even when other people thought I was weird or too intense or too much." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You are never too much, Lily. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. So we fight this? We fight this." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already called Margaret Winters, the toughest family law attorney in the state. What I didn't tell her was that Jake Patterson had significant advantages in this case: biological father, claims of rehabilitation, and most importantly, the financial resources to provide for her that I, on my bookkeeper's salary, simply couldn't match. What I didn't tell her was that I was terrified. The first strategy meeting with Margaret was sobering. She was a small woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes who came highly recommended for cases involving parental rights. "I'll be direct with you, Maggie," she said after reviewing the custody petition. "This is going to be difficult. He's the biological father, which gives him significant legal standing. The abandonment angle is our strongest argument, but his lawyers are already framing it as temporary incapacitation due to grief. For 15 years? That's the weakness in their position. No reasonable person disappears for 15 years and then suddenly becomes parent of the year. But here's what concerns me. They're going to argue that you've been alienating Lily from her father, preventing contact, possibly even hiding her location. That's ridiculous. He never tried to contact us. Can you prove that? Do you have documentation of attempted contact that you refused? I shook my head, and Margaret made a note. They're also going to point to the financial disparity. Your modest income versus his ability to provide for her education, her future, her needs as a young woman with exceptional potential. Since when is love measured in dollars? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Since family court became about what's best for the child, rather than what's right. And unfortunately, judges sometimes equate financial stability with good parenting. She leaned forward. But we have advantages too. 15 years of documented care, school records showing Lily's success under your guardianship, and most importantly, Lily's own voice. At 15, her preferences carry significant weight with the court. What do we need to do? Document everything. Every birthday he missed, every school event, every milestone. We need to show a pattern of complete absence, not temporary grief. And we need character witnesses, teachers, neighbors, family friends who can testify to your relationship with Lily and the stability you've provided. As I drove home from Margaret's office, I realized that the next few months were going to test everything Lily and I had built together. But I also realized something else. I wasn't the same woman who'd trembled at the thought of raising a 6-month-old baby 15 years ago. I was a woman who'd successfully raised a brilliant, kind, successful young woman despite overwhelming odds. And I wasn't about to let anyone take her away from me now. The courthouse felt like stepping into a different world, all marble and mahogany, hushed voices and clicking heels. Lily walked beside me, looking far too mature in her navy blue dress and low heels, clutching the folder of documents we'd prepared for our first hearing. "You okay?" I whispered as we found seats in the hallway outside courtroom 3B. She nodded, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Just nervous. I've never seen him before." "You know? I mean, I have baby pictures of him holding me, but I don't remember him at all." Before I could respond, Margaret appeared at my elbow. "They're here," she said quietly. I turned to see a man in an expensive suit walking down the hallway, with 2 lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. Jake Patterson, at 37, looked nothing like the grieving young widower I remembered. His hair was perfectly styled, his clothes screamed money, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted. When his eyes landed on Lily, his face transformed. For just a moment, I saw genuine shock, maybe even emotion. His daughter had grown from a baby into a young woman, and he was seeing her for the first time. But then his expression hardened as his gaze shifted to me. "That's him?" Lily whispered. "That's him." She studied her father with the same analytical intensity she brought to everything else. "He looks successful." That was exactly what worried me. Inside the courtroom, we sat at the plaintiff's table while Jake and his legal team took their seats across the aisle. Judge Harrison, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, called the session to order. "This is a preliminary hearing for Patterson versus Patterson, regarding custody of the minor child Lily Marie Patterson. Mr. Davidson, you may proceed." Jake's lead attorney was a polished man in his 40s who probably charged more per hour than I made in a month. He stood with practiced ease and began painting a picture of a grieving young father who'd made a terrible mistake. "Your Honor, my client freely admits that he made an error in judgment 15 years ago. He was 22 years old, had just lost his beloved wife, and was struggling with severe depression and alcohol dependency. Rather than subject his infant daughter to an unstable environment, he made the painful decision to leave her with her grandmother while he sought treatment. The spin was masterful, I had to admit. Mr. Patterson spent the next several years getting sober, completing his education, and building a successful career in software development. He is now remarried to a wonderful woman who's eager to welcome Lily into their family. They have a stable home, significant financial resources, and most importantly, the desire to provide Lily with everything she needs to reach her full potential." He gestured toward Jake, who was playing the role of repentant father perfectly, eyes downcast, hands folded, the picture of humility. Meanwhile, While we respect the care Ms. Patterson has provided, she is a 67-year-old woman living on a fixed income with no ability to provide for Lily's future educational needs or the opportunities that someone of Lily's exceptional abilities deserves. When it was Margaret's turn, she stood slowly, letting the silence stretch before she spoke. Your Honor, Mr. Davidson has painted a very pretty picture of rehabilitation and newfound responsibility. But let's look at the facts. Mr. Jake Patterson didn't leave his daughter with his mother-in-law for a few months while he got treatment. He disappeared for 15 years. 15 years without a single phone call, birthday card, Christmas present, or child support payment. She walked to our table and picked up a thick folder. We have documentation here of every school event, every illness, every milestone that Mr. Patterson missed. When Lily was hospitalized with pneumonia at age 3, where was her father? When she won the state science fair at age 12, where was her father? When she needed someone to teach her to drive, to help with college applications, to simply listen when she had a bad day, where was her father? Margaret's voice grew stronger with each question. He was absent, Your Honor. Completely and utterly absent. And now that his daughter has achieved success that could be financially beneficial, he suddenly remembers he's a parent? I watched Jake's face redden slightly, but his lawyers had coached him well. He maintained his remorseful expression. The defense will show that Ms. Maggie Patterson has provided stability, love, and support for 15 years. She has raised an exceptional young woman who is not only academically brilliant, but emotionally mature, socially responsible, and genuinely kind. This is not a case about what's financially best for the child. It's about what's emotionally and psychologically best. Judge Harrison listened to both sides, made several notes, and finally spoke. This is clearly a complex case with valid arguments on both sides. Before I make any preliminary decisions, I want to hear from the minor child herself. Ms. Patterson, approach the bench. My heart stopped as Lily stood up. This was it, the moment when my brilliant granddaughter would have to choose between the security she'd always known and the curiosity about the father she'd never had. As she walked toward the judge, I found myself holding my breath, knowing that everything we'd built together was about to be tested in ways I'd never imagined. But I also knew something Jake Patterson didn't understand yet. Lily might share his DNA, but she had Emma's heart and 15 years of my stubborn determination running through her veins. And she was nobody's burden. Judge Harrison studied Lily with kind but serious eyes. Ms. Patterson, I understand this is a difficult situation. You're old enough to have your voice heard in these proceedings. Can you tell me about your relationship with your grandmother? Lily stood straight, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, my grandmother saved my life, not just by taking me in, but by believing in me every single day for 15 years. She worked extra hours to pay for my tutoring, sat through countless parent-teacher conferences, and never once made me feel like I was anything but wanted. I felt tears sting my eyes as she continued. She taught me that intelligence without kindness is worthless, that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others. Everything good about who I am comes from her. Judge Harrison nodded. And what are your feelings about your father wanting to be part of your life? For the first time, Lily hesitated. I'm curious about him. I've always wondered what he was like, why he made the choices he did. But I don't understand how someone can just decide to be a parent again after 15 years. Would you be open to spending time with your father? Perhaps supervised visits while we work through this case? I wanted to scream, no, but this wasn't my decision to make. I guess I'd be willing to meet him, Lily said slowly. But, Your Honor, my home is with my grandmother. She's the only parent I've ever known. Judge Harrison made notes. Very well. I'm ordering supervised visitation, 2 hours every Saturday for the next month, supervised by a court-appointed social worker. We'll reconvene in 30 days to assess the situation. As we filed out of the courtroom, Jake approached us in the hallway. Up close, I could see Emma in his features, the same high cheekbones, the same stubborn chin that Lily had inherited. Lily, he said softly, and his voice broke slightly. You look so much like your mother. Lily studied him with scientific curiosity. I don't remember you at all. I know, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. He glanced at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the young man who'd grieved for my daughter. I'd like a chance to explain. If you'll let me. The court says I have to spend time with you anyway, Lily replied, and there was more of my attitude in her voice than I'd expected. Good girl. But I also saw something that worried me, a spark of interest in her eyes. The same curiosity that made her such a brilliant student was now focused on the mystery of her absent father. That night, Lily was quieter than usual. We sat in our small living room, she with homework and me with a book I wasn't really reading. "Grandma," she said finally, "why didn't you ever talk about him? Really talk about him, I mean." I set down my book, choosing my words carefully. "What would you have wanted me to say? Sweetheart? That he abandoned you when you needed him most? That he never once asked how you were doing or if you needed anything? But what was he like before? When he was married to Mom?" The question I'd been dreading for 15 years. Because the truth was I had liked Jake initially. He'd made Emma laugh, supported her through nursing school, seemed genuinely devoted to her. "He was different then," I said honestly. "He loved your mother very much. But people change when they're tested, Lily. Some rise to the challenge, others break under the pressure. Do you think he's really changed now?" I looked at my granddaughter, this brilliant, thoughtful young woman who saw the world in possibilities rather than limitations, and felt my heart ache. "I think people can change," I said carefully. "But I also think 15 years of absence speaks louder than any words ever could." The first supervised visit took place the following Saturday at a family center downtown. The social worker, a pleasant woman named Carol Stevens, explained that she'd observe their interaction and report back to the court. I wasn't allowed in the room, so I sat in the waiting area trying to read a magazine while my mind raced with worry. What was he telling her? What promises was he making? When they emerged 2 hours later, Lily looked thoughtful and confused. Jake looked hopeful. "How did it go?" I asked as we drove home. "He's different than I expected," Lily said slowly. "He knows about my app, about my achievements. He seems genuinely proud." Something cold settled in my stomach. Of course he was proud, now that she was worth something. He told me about Mom, stories I'd never heard before, about how they met, their first date, what she was like in college. And there it was, the hook, the one thing I couldn't give her. Memories of her mother from someone who'd loved Emma in a different way than I had. "He wants to take me to see where Mom went to nursing school next weekend," Lily continued. "Carol said it would be okay if you approved." I wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed that this was manipulation, that Jake was using Emma's memory to win Lily over. But how could I deny her the chance to learn more about her mother? "If that's what you want," I said. But that night, alone in my room, I allowed myself to feel the fear I'd been pushing down. Jake had money, stories about Emma, and the biological connection that trumped 15 years of love and sacrifice. What if I lost her? The change in Lily was subtle at first. She started asking more questions about her father, about the early years of my marriage to Emma's father, about financial planning for her future. Normal teenage curiosity, I told myself, but there was something underneath it that made me uneasy. "Grandma," she said over dinner on a Tuesday night, "Jake mentioned that you're planning to retire soon. What happens to my college fund then?" The question hit like a slap. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're 67. Most people retire by now. And with my MIT applications coming up, the costs are going to be enormous." She poked at her meatloaf. "Jake said he could handle all my college expenses plus graduate school if I want to pursue a PhD," Jake said. Everything was Jake said now. "Lily, we've always managed. I've been saving for your education since you were 6 months old." "I know, and I'm grateful. But realistically, your savings plus my scholarship opportunities might cover undergrad. Jake could fund everything. MIT, Stanford, wherever I want to go, without you having to worry about money." The conversation felt rehearsed, like someone had coached her on these talking points. I set down my fork. "Is that what Jake suggested you ask me?" Lily's cheeks flushed. "We were just talking about practical matters. He's good with financial planning. It's part of his job." "And what else did he tell you about practical matters?" "Nothing. Just..." She hesitated. "He mentioned that it might be easier for everyone if I spent more time with him and Susan. They have a big house in Portland, better internet for my development work. And Susan used to be a teacher. She understands gifted kids." Susan, the new wife I'd heard about but hadn't met. Another piece on Jake's chessboard. You want to spend more time with them? I'm curious, Lily said defensively. Is that such a crime? For 15 years you've been my whole world, and I love you for that. But don't I have a right to know my father? She was right, of course, but knowing someone and living with them were two very different things. The next Saturday's visit stretched to 4 hours. Then Jake requested an overnight visit for the following weekend. Chaperoned. Of course, but overnight nonetheless. I watched my granddaughter pack a small bag with an ache in my chest that felt like grieving. It's just one night, Grandma, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I know, sweetheart. I just want you to be careful. Careful of what? He's my father. He's a stranger who happens to share your DNA. Those aren't the same thing. Lily turned to face me, and for the first time in our 15 years together, I saw annoyance in her expression. You know, maybe the reason he stayed away was because he knew you'd never give him a real chance. The words hung between us like a knife. After everything we'd been through together, after 15 years of unconditional love and support, she was taking his side. Maybe, I said quietly, or maybe he stayed away because he's a coward who only shows up when there's something in it for him. Lily grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Carol's here. I'll see you tomorrow. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone in our quiet house with the terrible realization that I might be losing the most important person in my life to a man who'd already thrown her away once. Sunday evening, she came home different, more confident somehow, but also more distant. How was it? I asked. Good. Really good. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her expression serious. Grandma, we need to talk. My heart stopped. About what? About my future. About what's best for everyone. The language was all wrong, too formal, too rehearsed. This wasn't my Lily talking. Jake and Susan have made me an offer, she continued. They want me to come live with them. Not permanently, not right away, but for the rest of the school year. To see how it goes. And what did you tell them? I told them I'd think about it. I stared at my granddaughter, this brilliant young woman I'd raised from infancy, and realized that Jake Patterson was a far more dangerous opponent than I'd given him credit for. He wasn't just offering her money or stories about her mother. He was offering her something I never could, the fantasy of the perfect family she'd never had. Lily, I said carefully, do you remember what you told the judge? About home being with me? I remember, she said, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's time for me to get to know my real family. Real family. The words felt like a physical blow. I watched my granddaughter walk upstairs to her room, and for the first time since that lawyer's phone call, I wondered if I was going to lose this fight. But more terrifying than losing in court was the possibility that I'd already lost something far more important. Lily's heart. The knock on my door came at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, just as I was settling in with a cup of tea and trying not to think about how quiet the house felt without Lily's chatter. She was at Jake's for her third overnight visit this month, and the silences between us were growing longer. Margaret Winters stood on my porch, looking grim. We need to talk, she said. May I come in? I led her to the living room, my stomach already churning with dread. I got a call from opposing counsel today, Margaret began without preamble. They're accelerating their timeline. They want a full custody hearing scheduled for next month. Why the rush? Margaret's expression was troubled. Because they think they're winning. And Maggie, based on what I'm hearing from the social worker, they might be right. I sank into my chair. What is she saying? That Lily seems genuinely happy during her visits with her father, that she's expressed interest in living with him and his wife, that she's mentioned feeling guilty about the financial burden she places on you. Financial burden. The words Jake had planted in her head were taking root. There's more, Margaret continued. They're planning to bring in character witnesses who'll testify that Jake has been completely sober for 12 years, that he's financially stable, married to a woman with experience in education, and that he can provide opportunities for Lily that you simply can't match. And what do we have? 15 years of love and sacrifice. But in family court, that doesn't always trump financial stability and biological rights. I felt something crumble inside me. Are you saying we're going to lose? I'm saying we need to prepare for that possibility. But Maggie, there's something else. Something that's been bothering me about this whole case. She leaned forward. The timing is too perfect. Jake shows up exactly when Lily becomes famous and wealthy. His lawyers are too prepared, too polished. This feels orchestrated. What do you mean? I mean, someone's been watching you and Lily for a while. Someone's been planning this. The question is, how long has Jake known about Lily's success? And why wait until now to make his move? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's words, about the precision of Jake's legal strategy, about how quickly he'd inserted himself into Lily's life. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to my computer. If Jake had been watching us, there might be traces, social media posts he'd liked, search histories, something. What I found made my blood run cold. LinkedIn showed that Jake Patterson had been employed by Apple's Educational Technology division for the past 18 months. Not just employed, he was a senior developer in their app approval department. The same department that had approved Lily's app. My hands shook as I dug deeper. There, buried in industry publications and press releases, was the truth I'd been too naive to see. Jake hadn't just happened to hear about his daughter's success on the news. He'd been involved in approving her app from the beginning. He'd known exactly who she was, exactly how much she was worth, and he'd been planning this reunion for over a year. The next morning, I called Margaret immediately. "I found something," I said, barely containing my rage. "Jake works for Apple. He's been involved with Lily's app approval process from the beginning." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Margaret? I'm here. I'm just processing the implications." "Maggie, if what you're saying is true, this changes everything." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we might be looking at fraud, manipulation, possibly even insider trading. If Jake used his position at Apple to benefit financially from his daughter's app, and then used that information to plan this custody grab, can we prove it? We're going to try. But Maggie, we need to be careful. If we're wrong, if we can't prove this, it could backfire spectacularly. And if we're right? If we're right, Jake Patterson just handed us the ammunition to destroy his case." I hung up the phone feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But my hope was tempered by a terrible realization. If Jake had been manipulating this situation from the beginning, if he'd orchestrated not just his return, but possibly even Lily's initial success, then my granddaughter wasn't just at risk of being taken away from me. She was at risk of being destroyed by a man who saw her not as a daughter, but as a very valuable asset, and she had no idea what kind of danger she was in. The courthouse felt different this time, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl. Jake sat at the defendant's table looking confident and well-rested, occasionally whispering with his expensive lawyers. Susan, his wife, sat in the gallery behind him, a pretty blonde woman who smiled at Lily every time she looked her way. Lily, for her part, seemed torn. She'd grown closer to Jake over the past month, and I could see the conflict in her eyes every time she looked between him and me. Margaret had spent the week gathering evidence about Jake's position at Apple, his involvement in Lily's app approval, and the suspicious timing of his custody claim. We had documents, timestamps, and a paper trail that painted a damning picture. But as Jake's lawyer began his opening statement, I realized we were up against a master manipulator. "Your Honor," Davidson began, "what we have here is a classic case of parental alienation. For 15 years, Ms. Maggie Patterson has systematically poisoned this child against her biological father, telling her he abandoned her, that he didn't care, that he was a failure as a parent." I felt Lily stiffen beside me. Meanwhile, Mr. Jake Patterson has spent those same 15 years getting his life together, building a successful career, and preparing to be the father he should have been from the beginning. When he learned about his daughter's remarkable achievements that frankly outstrip anything her current guardian could have prepared her for, he knew it was time to step up. The spin was masterful. Jake wasn't an opportunist. He was a dedicated father, finally ready to claim his rightful place. Mr. Patterson can provide stability, educational opportunities, and financial security that Ms. Patterson simply cannot match. He has a loving wife who's eager to be a mother to Lily, a home equipped with everything a young tech prodigy could need, and most importantly, the biological and legal right to raise his own daughter. When it was Margaret's turn, she stood slowly, holding a thick folder of documents. "Your Honor," Mr. Davidson has painted a beautiful picture of rehabilitation and newfound responsibility. But what he hasn't told you is that Mr. Jake Patterson's sudden interest in his daughter isn't coincidental. It's calculated. She walked to the evidence table and picked up a stack of papers. Mr. Patterson works for Apple Inc., specifically in their educational technology division. He has worked there for 18 months, during which time he was directly involved in the approval process for his daughter's app. I saw Jake's face go pale, saw him lean forward to whisper urgently to his lawyer. "That's right, Your Honor. Mr. Patterson knew exactly who Lily Patterson was long before he filed for custody. He knew her potential value, her earning capacity, and her future prospects. This isn't a custody case. It's a business acquisition disguised as family reunification." Margaret placed document after document into evidence. Jake's employment records, internal Apple emails showing his involvement in Lily's app review, financial projections that he'd have had access to. Furthermore, Mr. Patterson has used his position to potentially manipulate his daughter's success. He had access to proprietary information about app performance, market analysis, and licensing potential. Information that he could have, and likely did, use to his financial advantage. Davidson was on his feet objecting, but the damage was done. Judge Harrison was reviewing the documents with increasing interest and growing concern. "Your Honor," Margaret continued, "this man didn't disappear for 15 years and then suddenly develop paternal instincts. He disappeared for 15 years and then realized his daughter was worth millions. There's a significant difference." But Jake's team wasn't finished. Davidson requested a brief recess, and when we returned, Jake himself took the stand. "Yes, I work for Apple," he said, his voice steady and remorseful. "Yes, I was aware of my daughter's app during the approval process. But, Your Honor, that's exactly when I realized what a terrible mistake I'd made." He turned to look directly at Lily, and I had to admit, his performance was compelling. Seeing her work, seeing her brilliance, seeing what an incredible young woman she'd become, it broke my heart, because I realized that I'd missed all of it. I'd let grief and fear rob me of 15 years with my daughter. Lily was listening intently, her expression conflicted. Did I use my position to help her app get approved? No, Your Honor, the app succeeded on its own merit. Did I profit from inside information? Absolutely not. But did seeing her success make me realize I needed to be part of her life? Yes, because she deserves a father who can match her potential, who can open doors for her that her grandmother, however well-meaning, simply cannot. It was a masterful recovery. He'd admitted to the facts we'd uncovered while spinning them into evidence of his love and dedication. But Margaret wasn't done. "Mr. Patterson," she said, approaching the witness stand, "you say you realized you'd made a mistake when you saw your daughter's work, but according to Apple's internal records, you were tracking her progress for over a year before you filed for custody. Can you explain that delay?" Jake hesitated for the first time. I needed time to prepare, to make sure I could provide for her properly. Or did you need time to ensure her app was successful enough to make this custody grab worthwhile?" "Objection!" Davidson shouted. "Sustained," Judge Harrison said, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Character witnesses for both sides, expert testimony about Lily's needs, and finally, Lily herself on the stand. "Lily," Judge Harrison said gently, "you've heard a lot of information today. Some of it might be confusing or upsetting, but I need you to tell me honestly, where do you want to live?" My granddaughter looked at me, then at Jake, then back at the judge. For a moment, she seemed like the 6-month-old baby I'd held in my arms 15 years ago, vulnerable and needing protection. "Your Honor," she said finally, "I need some time to think." Judge Harrison nodded. "I'm going to recess this hearing for 1 week. Lily, I want you to spend that time really considering what you've learned today and what you want for your future. When we reconvene, I'll expect your final answer." As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt like I was walking through a nightmare. The evidence against Jake was damning, but it might not matter if Lily chose him anyway. And from the confusion in her eyes, I wasn't sure which way she was leaning. The week between hearings was the longest of my life. Lily barely spoke to me, spending most of her time in her room or on long walks around town. I could see her wrestling with everything she'd learned about Jake, about his motives, about the life she'd thought she wanted. On Wednesday, She finally came to me. "Grandma," she said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table where we'd shared 15 years of homework sessions and heart-to-heart talks. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Always, sweetheart." "Did you know about Jake working at Apple?" I shook my head. "Not until I researched it myself last week. I was as shocked as you were." "But you suspected something, didn't you? You kept warning me about him." "About his motives." I chose my words carefully. "I suspected that someone doesn't disappear for 15 years and then suddenly want to be a parent unless there's something in it for them. But I hoped I was wrong. For your sake, I hoped he'd genuinely changed." Lily was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think he ever really loved Mom?" The question I'd been dreading. Because the truth was, I did think Jake had loved Emma, which made his abandonment of Lily even more heartbreaking. "Yes," I said, "I think he loved your mother very much, but loving someone and being worthy of their love are two different things." "And Lily," I continued, "people can love you and still hurt you. They can love you and still choose themselves over you when it matters most." She nodded slowly. "I know. I wanted so badly to have a normal family. A mom and a dad and a house with a white picket fence. Stupid, right?" "Not stupid at all. It's what every child deserves." "But I did have that, didn't I? Just in a different way. You were my mom and my dad and my grandma all rolled into one." Tears stung my eyes. "You were the greatest privilege of my life, Lily. Every sleepless night, every worried moment, every proud milestone, all of it was worth it to watch you become the incredible person you are. Even if I'm difficult and too intense and too much, you are never too much. You're exactly who you're supposed to be." Friday morning, Lily made her decision. "I want to go see Jake one more time before the hearing," she said. "Alone. No social worker, no supervision. I need to look him in the eye and ask him directly about everything we learned in court." Every instinct screamed at me to say no. But Lily was 15, nearly an adult, and she deserved the right to confront her father on her own terms. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Will you drive me there?" An hour later, I sat in my car outside Jake and Susan's expensive Portland home, watching my granddaughter walk up to the front door. She looked so small against the imposing entrance, but there was steel in her spine that reminded me of Emma. She was inside for over an hour. When she finally came out, her face was streaked with tears, but her expression was resolved. "How did it go?" I asked as she got in the car. "He didn't deny any of it," she said quietly. "When I asked him directly if he'd been tracking my success, if he'd planned this whole thing, he couldn't look me in the eye. And he said that it didn't matter why he came back. What mattered was that he was here now and wanted to be my father." I waited for her to continue. "But that's not how it works, is it? You don't get to abandon someone and then decide when it's convenient to be their parent again. No, sweetheart, that's not how it works. He kept talking about opportunities he could give me, schools he could send me to, people he could introduce me to, but he never once asked what I wanted, what made me happy, what I was afraid of." "And what are you afraid of?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm afraid of becoming the kind of person who measures love in dollar signs. I'm afraid of losing the part of me that cares more about helping kids learn than about getting rich." "That will never happen, Lily. Your heart is too big and too good." "It might, though. If I went with him, if I got caught up in that world of money and status and opportunity. You taught me that success without character is meaningless. He's offering me success without ever asking about my character." Monday morning, we returned to court for the final hearing. Judge Harrison looked tired, like she'd spent the weekend wrestling with a decision that would change a young girl's life forever. "Lily," she said, "have you made your decision?" Lily stood up, and I saw Emma in her posture, straight-backed and brave. "Yes, Your Honor. I want to stay with my grandmother." The relief that flooded through me was so intense, I almost fainted. "Furthermore," Lily continued, "I want to formally request that Jake Patterson's parental rights be terminated. He abandoned me when I was 6 months old and only returned when I became financially valuable. That's not a father. That's a stranger trying to profit from my success." Jake shot to his feet. "Lily, you don't understand what you're giving up." "I understand perfectly," she replied, turning to face him. "I'm giving up a man who sees me as an investment opportunity. I'm keeping the woman who sees me as her granddaughter." Judge Harrison listened to final arguments from both sides, but the outcome felt inevitable. When she ruled in our favor, granting me permanent custody and terminating Jake's parental rights, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, Lily hugged me fiercely. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she whispered. "I'm sorry I let him get in my head. You don't need to apologize for wanting to know your father. You just needed to see who he really was. And now I know. My real father is a 67-year-old woman who taught me that love isn't measured by what someone can give you, but by what they're willing to sacrifice for you." As we drove home to our small house with its modest furniture and secondhand everything, I realized that we were the lucky ones. We had something Jake Patterson would never understand. No matter how much money he made or how many opportunities he could offer, we had a family built on love, not convenience, built on sacrifice, not profit, built on 15 years of choosing each other every single day. And that was worth more than all the App Store success in the world. The burden that Jake had left on my doorstep 15 years ago had become the greatest blessing of my life. And no court in the world could take that away from us now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.